Church leaders, you can help people know Jesus and your church can grow. And I want to help you. My name is Pastor Jeff. I'm at Revolution Church in Salina, Kansas. And our church went through a huge growth trajectory where we went from very small to a large, medium, large-sized church in a very short amount of time. And there's a few things we did. Today I want to talk to you about one or two of them. The first, this is my son, Simeon. A few years ago, I took my son out to our family farm, and we were riding ATVs. Now, in this picture, and at that time, Simeon was 5 years old. So he got on this little 50cc four-wheeler, and it's a real four-wheeler, okay? It's not like a little kid's one, but it's a smaller one. But he gets on it, and I'm sitting out in the field, and it's basically a flat field, except for one hill made out of dirt, right kind of smack dab in the middle of the gate. Well, he comes out on his four-wheeler and he starts flying, cranking full speed, and I notice he's aimed right at the dirt pile. He's going to jump it. And I'm like, Simeon, slow down. But he can't hear me over the sound of the engine. And he hits that sucker. He holds on, but his whole head and back flop back, and he's in the air. He gets about this high in the air, and it's this point when I realize I'm a terrible dad. But he flies through the air. He lands, bounces, skids, turns around, and then finally comes to a stop, and he looks at me. His eyes are about this big. And I look at him, and I just jump off my ATV and go, yes! And he goes, yes! We were like so happy. Look, I'm going to admit, as a father, sometimes I let things get out of control. And when my kids survive, I count that as a win. And I'm going to be honest with you as a church leader. Sometimes church leaders, we want to think we're in control, but we know we're not really in control. A lot of stuff's just happening. We want to grow. We see people come in. We see some people get baptized. We see some people leave. And there's a lot that we feel like is out of control. And 5 to 10 years ago at Revolution Church, we had this, yes, we survived mentality. Every once in a while, someone would get baptized. Yes, that was awesome. But then some people would leave. And, we really didn't know exactly what we were doing that was working and what we were doing that wasn't working. I worked really hard to the point of being exhausted. And we'd grow by 2%, maybe up to 8% every year. But then we'd lose some people too. And some years we would shrink. The worst part of it all was that new guests would come. And they wouldn't stay very long. Someone wouldn't come back at all. Someone would come for 2 or 3 weeks or 6 or 7 months, and they'd leave. If I was honest, most guests didn't stay. And that's intensely frustrating because we want to tell the world about Jesus, and we want people to come to faith, and we want to see our church carrying out the Great Commission like Jesus told us to. But then something happened for our church. A couple of things. We got a new building, which was a huge thing. We changed the way I handled some staff stuff, and a whole bunch of things happened. But I think the most important thing that happened for us was that we implemented what's called the roadmap and processes. And we started to grow because of this roadmap process. I want you to see our growth chart, not because I want to brag, but because I want to show you how this actually works, right? So we're in a small town, medium-sized town, but whether you're in a little town or a gigantic metropolitan city, on average, churches grow by 1.5%. We were growing at one point by 100%, and then we grew by 25%, and then 30%. Like, it was crazy. We had almost 400% growth in just 5 years until we hit max capacity in our church building. We were doing 3 services, and I just said, for my sanity, we're not going to do 4 or 5, 6 services. So we kind of stopped growing after we got to the 3 services, and we're building a new building right now. But it was all really healthy growth. We participated in a study called the Reveal Study in 2020, and our church is in the 99th percentile for church health, as far as spiritual maturity, helping new believers come to faith, and then continued on their journey. And the roadmap and the processes that we follow that go along with the roadmap helped us achieve this. Now, if you've heard of the roadmap, if you're watching the video because of the roadmap, I want to talk about this a little bit differently than I normally do. The roadmap is a very simple thing. I want to interact with it a little bit. When you come to Revolution Church, you're a first-time guest, right? This is the beginning of our roadmap. The next thing you do at our church is you come to the welcome class. And everybody here learns it. I'm going to talk about later on how we really drive going step by step and how we push it. But it's so simple. You're a first-time guest, then you come to the welcome class. After that, you can go to a growth group or a small group. Once you've been in a growth group for a while, you can start serving, and a lot of people stay there for a while. And then we encourage you to join and become a member. After you've been a member for a while, we not only encourage, but we push people to become leaders in the church. And we don't define leadership as a position of leadership, but we define it as helping others get through this roadmap process. It's very simple. Now, this is not going to replace good preaching. Your church has to have good preaching. This is not going to replace great leadership. You have to have great leaders in your church. And you've got to be willing to take the ones that aren't so great and replace them. This is not going to replace loving people. Your church has to love people. And every church has a roadmap of some kind. And if you're doing those things, if you're doing good preaching and great leadership and you're loving people the right way, you've got a roadmap of some kind, but maybe it looked more like our roadmap looked like a number of years ago, which is like this. Someone comes to your church the very first time, and then what happens? They don't know. Nobody knows. It depends who asks them first, right? They could go and do a landscaping team, or maybe they're going to join the nursing home ministry. Maybe they're going to join the praise dance team. Does your church have a dance team? Maybe they're going to join the tech crew, or maybe they're going to skip all of this and just start volunteering in the office. Maybe someone at your church doesn't even attend your church, but they're in the office. Like, who knows? Like, most of our roadmaps are just so scattered, and people don't know the exact process to follow. That's a normal church. That was our church for a long time. But I want to ask you a question. Why does your church exist? How does your church win? And simply saying, our church is here to glorify God and gear up the saints is not clear enough. That's what all churches do. Okay, every church is there to glorify God and prepare the saints for acts, works of service. What about your church specifically? What does your church do that's different? Who does your church reach? What is the destination point that people need to end up at? Where is it, and how do they get there? In our church, we reach a lot of poor people. They're addicted, they're postmodern, they're usually people in their 20s and 30s, and we realize that they need community more than anything else if they want to get saved, if they want to mature, and if they want to continue in the faith. And so we came up with a goal, and this is important to the roadmap because you can't define a roadmap unless you know what your goal is. We said our goal is to help spiritual orphans. And spiritual orphans, you could say these are the unsaved people. They don't have a home spiritually, so we call them orphans. Our goal is to help spiritual orphans. How do we help them? By creating and then welcoming them into healthy Christian community. So that's our church's goal. All right, healthy Christian community is something that's pretty clearly defined in our church. If you were to ask a church member here what it is, they'd be able to tell you. Everyone here knows what it means. Spiritual orphans are those people who don't know Jesus, period. So our only goal is to create healthy Christian community here and then invite people into that healthy Christian community. And how do we do it? Well, the roadmap helps us do it. So all of this, our welcome class, our growth group, our serving, our membership, and our leadership, all this is deeper, 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 deeper into our community. So at every single point of the roadmap, every single stop they're going to make, they're driven deeper into community. So they're coming for the first time as a guest. When they come into the welcome class for the very first time, they're going to sit down with a pastor and maybe another leader in the church. And they're going to hear us talk about what church is supposed to be like, why we would like them to come back, what we believe. And for the first time, they may have an hour-long discussion about faith. And they're able to ask any question. Right, this is like a huge deal for most people because it's never been like that. So they get community right away. And then join a small group, and they've never had community like this before. Now instead of just one-time class, now they're committed to a small group of people and an ongoing. This is why I think you should have a roadmap, right? More commitment, more people, more sacrifice to those people as they go up the roadmap. We knew community was our goal. So to get them deeper in community, we had to define these levels. The direction is so clear. I was talking to my brother who worked for Autotrader.com or Cars.com, and he helped manage websites for a lot of different car companies. He discovered that if you make a website for a car company, and at the bottom, let's say someone clicks on I want a Ford Focus or a brand new Ford Mustang. At the bottom, if you have 4 buttons, buy the car, talk to a salesman, research more, or compare a car to others, or whatever the 4 buttons are, you get less purchases than if you only have one button at the bottom that says, buy this car now. One option results in more conversions. One button results in more conversions. A lot of times we do our churches, and remember that crazy roadmap? People come to our church and we think they want options. But the more options you give, the more often the customer leaves, the non-Christian leaves the church. I want to say, yes, this matches our roadmap so well. Here's what I want you to understand really clearly. The roadmap, your roadmap if you make one, helps people connect in a simple way. It helps them connect. And the important part is that it's very simple, right? Even newcomers know where they belong if you have a roadmap. That's the number one thing that matters. We used to get a lot of visitors at the church, but we couldn't keep them. Now our church is a lot more sticky. People stick and stay. And the roadmap is one of the big reasons we grew, because now people know how to stay. It's not confusing. A guest doesn't walk in the church and we say, oh, do you want to join the nursery? Do you want to go microwave burritos with the associate pastor? Do you want to preach sometime? Do you want to join a small group? Do you want to do a Bible study? Do you want to lead a class? No, we go, oh, thank you for coming to Revolution Church. It's your first time here? You should go to the welcome class. And the next person they talk to, they say, oh, you've never been here before? You should go to the welcome class. You don't have to know anything about church. You don't have to know anything about theology. You don't have to have ever set foot in a church in your life. And wow, everybody here thinks I should go to the welcome class. I guess I'm going to the welcome class. And in the welcome class, we talk to the people who are new to the church. We give them a copy of the roadmap. So the roadmap you saw here, we actually put it in the little booklet for them. We show them the roadmap. We're like, wow, guys, you've been a first-time guest. Now you're at the welcome class. And then we tell them, if you want more from God at Revolution Church, your next step is to join a small group, is to join a growth group. And you think people would say, oh, you're limiting me, but they don't. You know what they say? I think I'll do that. But it has to be simple. It has to be simple. If it's not simple, they can't follow it. You ever stepped into a church or a store and the layout was confusing and you didn't know where the bathrooms were? You didn't even know how to make your... I went to a store one time. I wanted to purchase something. I couldn't find the checkout aisle. It was so confusing. Churches are too confusing for people who've never been there before. Don't make it confusing. Now look, we even had to cut out some ministries because we said this is going to be simple. Our roadmap's going to be super simple. And so we cut out every single ministry that doesn't fit on our roadmap. We made some people mad. You might make some people mad at your church. But it was worth it because spiritual orphans started getting saved and they started staying at church. Now, the second reason I think the roadmap is a big deal and why you should implement it is that everyone knows what's expected of them. It's your first time here? Go to the welcome class. Have you been in a growth group for 2 years? Great. You know that serving is the next step for you. Have you been serving? Then you know that membership is the next piece for you. There was a couple who came to my office, said, hey, Pastor Jeff, we want you to marry us. And, oh, congratulations. How long have you guys been dating? And they said, 6 years. You've been dating for 6 years. Wow. So I asked the question, and I always ask, do you live together? And they said the same thing everybody else says nowadays. Yes, for 6 years. I said, you've been having sex? You probably don't need to know how that question was answered. Of course, for 6 years. Listen, our culture gets everything out of order. To not live together with someone seems backwards to people in our culture. So I'm not exaggerating when I say that when there are clear expectations and a clearly defined order, people pay attention because it's so unusual. With a clear roadmap, everyone knows. Newcomers, people in your church, everyone knows what's required of them. The third reason I think roadmap is so powerful is, I mentioned before about the Reveal study that our church had done. I was doing a Zoom call with one of the professionals from the Reveal study, and they work at Willow Creek. Willow Creek realized a number of years ago that they'd reached a lot of people, but none of them were maturing spiritually, and so they did this huge study to figure out how people mature, and it's a really good thing. If your church wants to do a study, I recommend the Reveal study. It's very, very good stuff. So anyway, in this study, they categorize your church and your people into 4 different categories of spiritual maturity. And we didn't have a lot of people on the lowest level of spiritual maturity. So we got level 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is the highest level, and this is the lowest level. And I was concerned. I said to the lady on the Zoom call, I said, "What? I thought we were reaching lots of people for Christ, but we don't have very many people in the lowest level of maturity. I'm concerned." And she said to me, well, no, don't worry. She says, "When I look at your results," and she had studied thousands of churches, she says, "When I look at your results, it's clear that you are reaching lots of new Christians, but somehow you've got them on," and I love how she said this, "you've got them on some kind of conveyor belt. It's like they step into the church, get saved, and they're moving down the path without much effort." And I just laughed. I said, "I know exactly what that is. That's the roadmap." And here's why that roadmap is so important. If you organize the steps properly, you can set it up to handle people's level of maturity. And we're talking about spiritual maturity here, not like emotional or just social maturity, whatever. This is spiritual maturity. So if you set your roadmap up right, you're going to take people from where they don't know Christ all the way until they're deeply committed to Jesus Christ. Your roadmap can deepen their commitment. So this isn't just for non-believers. This isn't just for new people. This is also for people who've been coming to your church for a while. If you set this up right, it's going to work really well for everybody. A guy came up to me at church one day. It was his first time here. And he says to me, "Hi, my name's so-and-so, and no, nice to meet you. I'm glad you're here." And he said, "This is a little strange, but," and he unfolded a piece of paper. "I have a sermon here, and God told me to preach the sermon here at your church today. Can I preach it?" How about no? No. Could you imagine a guest coming to your church the very first time and you ask them to give this sermon? That is how you find disaster in your church, isn't it? A non-Christian comes in. What does a non-Christian need to do? They need to grow. But too often we expect them to start serving somewhere in a place that sounds interesting to them, but is not what they need spiritually. So let's talk about the steps. Why are they organized the way they are? Well, in our church, they're actually organized by level of commitment. All right, coming to the welcome class, super low commitment. It's one time, they get some free pizza, they learn about our church for an hour, we provide babysitting, so easy, zero commitment level. We found out later that it lines up perfectly with the Reveal study, Willow Creek's levels of spiritual maturity. So that's what a new believer needs. They need good reasons to come on Sunday morning. And then after the welcome class, we encourage them to go to a small group, which as people grow, they grow less on Sunday morning, more in serving or in learning in small groups. And then serving comes next, and then serving the poor comes next. And it was just boom, boom, just fit right with our roadmap. And I went, "Oh man, this is so good." Now, I do want to talk about membership for a minute, because you might have noticed that we put membership last on our roadmap. And other churches that I've worked at have typically put membership near the beginning. Well, the way we look at membership is the highest level of commitment. All right, to be a member in our church, it requires proof that you're an actual Christian, proof that you're actually committed to Revolution Church. Membership is where we can do excommunication. And I'm not going to excommunicate someone who's been to our church for 2 or 3 months and is going to a small group trying to learn who Jesus is. But if they're a member and they're unwilling to repent from their sin, then we can excommunicate, and that's appropriate. It's also when I can say to someone, "Hey, I'm officially your pastor, and you're officially one of my sheep." Like, this is an official relationship now. And so we put membership at the high end because we view it as the highest level of commitment. But now let's talk about what happens in between these steps, right? So we've got first-time guests, welcome class, growth groups, serving, then leadership, membership, then leadership. But there's something that happens in between each one of those steps. And this is the secret sauce, if you will. I want you to imagine someone with muscles coming in saying, "These are big muscles. You can have muscles too." And then all they do is they show off their muscles. That's not helpful. I'm doing a poor job of displaying that, but that's not very helpful, right? There's a lot going on behind those big muscles, right? Like going to the gym every day, doing certain exercises, eating and drinking certain things, not eating and drinking certain things. A mistake I've made before was telling people to do the roadmap, but I left out all the behind-the-scenes stuff. And I think the behind-the-scenes stuff is the most important stuff. So what if growth group comes after welcome class, just like it's on our roadmap? So what if? If you have no way to move someone from welcome class to growth group, your roadmap is meaningless. So we have these things at our church called processes, and they're written down, they're very clearly defined. I know it's going to be hard for you to read this. I'm just giving you an example here. I'm going to read a couple lines here for you. This is our welcome class process. So what we've done with the process is we've taken a sheet of paper, like a spreadsheet, or sometimes just bullet points, sometimes it's really more details, but we basically say this is our welcome class process. Step 1, you got to do this. Step 2, you got to do this. Step 3, you got to do this. And we define what needs to happen for the welcome class to work. But not just for the welcome class to work, we define what needs to happen for the welcome class to move people into growth groups. So every single Sunday, this is the when and this is the why. So every single Sunday, we say the first 5 minutes are crucial to identify a guest and make them feel at home. Right? We know if you go to look at studies, the first 5 minutes that someone's at your church, crucial to make them feel welcome. And so what are we going to do? We're going to identify and have a conversation with a new guest. We're going to hand them a free drink card and specifically point out the welcome class, telling them what it is and where to get a free drink from. Who does it? We have a group called the 5-Minute Team. Who owns this process? Right now it says Jared, right? The guy in charge of that team. So number one thing, we know right now when someone walks in the church, within the first 5 minutes, someone is going to hand them a card that says, go to the welcome class. Right? They're here. They're a first-time guest. But how do we get them from first-time guest into the welcome class? This is the very first thing we're going to do. The process says we got to hand them a card. Someone's going to tell them about it. Then, every single Sunday, our study shows 1-to-1 correspondence of invite to attending welcome class. What does that mean? We've done some internal studies. And however many invites we give out to new guests, that's how many people show up at the welcome class. Mind-blowing, right? Wow, who could have guessed? So we identify a new guest. We ask them if they've heard about welcome class at Hebrews, that's our coffee bar, and we tell them how important it is. So this is step number 2. They're going to take a free drink card. They've already heard about the welcome class. Then they're going to go to our coffee bar, and when someone at the coffee bar gets that free drink card, they know, if I see the free drink card, I'm supposed to say to them, have you heard about the welcome class? And if they say yes, I'll go, oh, good, because it's so important. It's where you learn about. If they say no, I say, oh, someone should have told you, let me tell you. You know what? This means if they've been at our church for 7 minutes, they've already been personally invited to our welcome class twice. Every single okay, I'm just going to skip a few. So then on Monday, we do a follow-up from the pastor. We don't let them forget. We print out a newcomer letter. We send them a letter. Here the Sunday before, someone contacts them right after church, invites them to the welcome class again. And we get down here Tuesday, we send out a reminder postcard that it's coming. Saturday, they get a personal phone call from someone. Are you coming to the welcome class tomorrow? We do it once a month. And then the Saturday prior, we make sure we get the food. And a Sunday after church, we call attention. Hey, there's going to be the welcome class. If you sign up, go to it. So if they've come to church once, they should get 8 invitations to the welcome class. That's how you take a new guest and you get them into a welcome class. You follow the process. Now, some people might look at this and go, that isn't ministry. It's like a marketing or a business plan. I kind of felt that way at first until people were getting saved, until people were giving their life to Jesus Christ and getting baptized. And when they were giving their testimony, they were saying things like, when I came in here, someone told me that I needed to get into a growth group. When I sat in that welcome class and Pastor Dave told me, you know what, bro, you need to be in a small group. Then I joined one, and in that small group, they told me, you know what, dude, you need to be serving. When I started hearing stuff like that, I went, I don't care if this looks like a business plan or a marketing plan. What I care about is that people's lives are changing. It's interesting because churches always talk about, oh, we got a mission. We're on a mission. We're gonna do stuff. Andy Stanley, whatever you think about Andy Stanley theologically, he said this statement, and it's absolutely true. Your mission statement is hanging on the wall. Your systems are happening down the hall. What does this mean? You can say your mission or your church's goal is whatever you want to say. I mean, everybody in your church might be able to recite, our church's mission is to blah, 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 blah. But what's actually happening in the office on Monday morning? What's happening Saturday night before church starts? What's happening with your volunteers when a new guest walks in the door. Those are your systems. Those are your processes. The things that people do and the instructions that people follow every single day, week in and week out, those are your processes, and that's what gets done, not your mission. Your mission, wow! Your mission statement is hanging on the wall. Your systems are happening down the hall. You can say what you want about non-Christians getting saved, but how are they getting saved? Did you invite them? Did you invite them back? Did you give them a reason to come back? Do they know about your upcoming class? Listen, your kids on sports teams have processes, right? Practice, get coaching, go to practice again, go to the game, get feedback. Go to practice again, get coaching, practice some more, go to the game, get feedback. It's a process. In and out, in and out, in and out. That's why sports are everywhere. We have systems and processes for them from the time they're little kids in kindergarten all the way up to through high school. I used to come home and I would get so mad at my children because my couch cushions would always be off the couch. I've got 6 kids. So I would come home and my couch cushions would be off the couch every day. And I'd start ranting, kids, get these couch cushions back on the couch. What are you doing? Don't you obey? I've told you to keep these couch cushions on the couch 100 times, blah, blah, blah. Never got fixed. I thought, you know what, Jeff? You know that everything is about processes. I've created processes for all kinds of stuff at church and at work and all that. So they take the cushion off, and I realized I had actually created a process. They take the cushion off, and so I yell at them, then they put the cushion back on. That was the process that we had inadvertently agreed to. So I decided I'm going to change this process. I told my kids, anytime I see a couch cushion off the couch, all of you have to write 3 sentences. Couch cushions, go on couch. And Simpson even shortened it. Cushions on couch, okay? That's it. If there's a cushion off the couch when I come home, cushions on couch. Just 3 sentences of 3 words each. It's not that big of a deal, right? But the kids immediately said, I don't want to do that. Well, and they started asking, well, what if I'm not home? You said all of us have to write it? Yeah, all of you. I don't care who took the cushion off because I'm not doing an investigation. Well, but what if JJ isn't home when, well, if JJ's not home when I get there and there's a cushion off the couch, then JJ can write his sentences when he gets home. Hardcore. Okay, the next day I came home, there were cushions off the couch. 3 sentences, everybody. Oh, this is dumb. This is stupid. They all wrote their 3 sentences. And after that, all the children in my house constantly pushed each other to get the cushions back on the couch. If one of them, my little 6-year-old, if he starts to take the cushion off the couch, the other one's like, yo, what are you doing? Don't you even leave that off. Like they're policing each other. It's been 5 years since I started doing that. And they've been off maybe 10 times in 5 years, and it used to be every single day. Why does it work? No matter what your mission is, what matters are the systems that you're implementing. Henry Cloud, a great, great author, said, people change their behavior and thinking not because they're told to be different. People don't change because you tell them to. People change when the conditions are present that require and empower them to figure out what to do and to act on a plan. So they've got to be able to figure it out and then act on it. And there's 2 pieces here. It has to require them to do it, and it has to empower them to do it. Listen, human behavior doesn't change based on an idea. Human behavior changes based on the processes that are in your life. An addict will stay an addict no matter how much they hate their drug until they're in a place that requires and empowers a change. It could be crashing and burning, and now they're in jail. It could be realizing they're about to lose their children, so they join NA. So they go to a church. They get with other people who are sober. What is happening? They've now got a system. You've heard of the 12-step programs? What is that? It's a system. The roadmap, and more importantly, the systems behind the roadmap, create conditions for people to make life change. Now, let me tell you a couple things if you want to use some of these processes, okay? Because you're going to make a roadmap, and then you're going to make a process to get from one step of the roadmap to another. Your processes will get more complicated as you get more staff and as your church grows, but you need to start simple. Okay, you're going to add to process as you make mistakes or you see reasons to be more clear, but you're going to start simple. Listen, if you make a 3-page process at the beginning that details a million things, even if you make one as complicated as the welcome class one I showed you right at the beginning, no one's going to follow it. It's like on January 1st when people are like, I'm going to go to the gym every single day. I'm going to become a vegetarian. I'm going to drink 3 gallons of water. Oh, yeah. Well, how about you just start by not eating cake and ice cream for dessert every single night? Let's just start simple. And the other thing you want to do, you want to bus-proof this. Bus-proofing is, just imagine that your pastor got hit by a bus tomorrow morning. Would anyone know how to do his stuff? This is another reason processes need to be written down so that I know I have a great, great, great associate pastor in charge of our small groups. But I know that if he gets hit by a bus tomorrow, I can take all of his processes that are written down and give them to someone else, and we're going to feel it that he's gone. It's going to be painful, and we're going to miss a couple steps, but the majority of what he does is going to remain intact because he follows a system that is written down. It is bus-proof. Processes should also include some flexibility, but also rigidity. So, okay, what is it you can be flexible about? Well, if someone comes to our church and they're really convicted in the sermon and, it's their first or second week here and they haven't gone to the welcome class yet, but they really want to go to a small group, should we let them? In our church, we've decided, yeah, you can go to a small group if you haven't done welcome class yet, but we're really going to push you to get in that welcome class. If someone wants to start serving, that's a no-go. That's rigidity. You can't serve here and you can't become a member here unless you've gone to the welcome class and then done growth groups. That's just not how it works here because we need to know that you understand our culture before you start volunteering. We could also have some flexibility, like what if we changed our growth group schedule to a 5-week session instead of a 10-week session? Great. Now you have to write in your processes in a way that you could change stuff when it happens, but it also has to be clear enough so that people's brains can remember how it's supposed to happen. Because you can't remember everything. In fact, this whole process stuff, this writing down of the systems, this becomes your administrative assistant. And don't get me wrong, I got an administrative assistant here. She's amazing. She's worth $1 million a year. I wish I could pay that. But this kind of becomes and by you, maybe you're the administrative assistant. Well, this process becomes your administrative assistant. If you're a ministry leader or a board member, whatever process you're in charge of becomes your administrative assistant. Because you can't possibly remember everything you need to do for the 100 people at your church, or the 50 people, or the 500 people, every single week, every month, every year. Look, we have processes for everything. For our welcome class, for our growth groups, for our offsite meeting in January, for Easter, for Christmas Eve, for the membership class. I could just keep on going. We got processes out the wazoo. We put them on our calendars because we can't remember how to do all this stuff. I can't keep track of how far away things are, so we put it on the calendar, we write down the systems. And then the most important thing, someone must own the process. If you write it down and file it away, it'll never happen. Someone's got to own it. And that person takes the responsibility to say, excuse me, I own the growth group process, and I've noticed that we aren't doing step number 3. Whoever's in charge of growth groups usually needs to own that process. Don't be weird about it. Whoever's doing it needs to own that process, but someone's got to own the process. My son Jeremiah, he's 6 now. When he was 1.5, I would always put him on the stairs. He would walk up a few stairs where he was about even with me, and then he would go, "Dad, catch," and lean forward, and I would catch him right there. Well, one day I'm sitting on the couch, and I hear him say, "Daddy!" I look up, he's at the top of the stairs, and he goes, "Catch!" and falls, and I'm like, "No!" And I run to the stair. It's too late. That dude is coming down. That little guy bounced and rolled down the staircase before I got to him. Listen, if someone doesn't own the process, that baby will get dropped every single time. And it's got to be someone who's passionate about it. You got to review it regularly in your staff or your leadership meetings. Maybe every month pull out a process and say, this month we're reviewing the Easter process. Put it on a calendar that you follow. A few other things that are important about the process. Each process should pick up where something else left off and hand off to another thing. So you're going to have a welcome class process. That welcome class process that we have starts with, Hey, someone's first time here, here's how we get them into it. At the bottom of the welcome class process, here's how we get them out to growth groups, right? Your processes are part of that roadmap. It's just a part that nobody sees, right? So you gotta start with the first step, and by the time that process is done, you're taking them somewhere else. Also, processes should make staff or volunteers in charge of the hard stuff. What is the hard stuff? Way too often, churches expect the guest, the newbies, to do the hard stuff. Come to our welcome class on June 1st. We expect them to remember when. We expect them to remember where. We expect them to show up. We expect them to assume that they're welcomed. We expect them to contact us and tell us that they're coming. No. Do the opposite of that. You give them a card and invite them. You do that 5 times. You call them and ask them to come. You tell them where it's at 10 times. You pull them in when they're in the hallway. You order the food. You tell them, I'm going to have a babysitter. How many kids are you bringing, right? You do all the hard work, so all they have to do is go, yeah, I'll come, and just follow you down the hallway. Like that, use your processes to make sure that you're doing all the hard work. Do the hard work. All right, so I hope you see how the roadmap and the processes really can change things at your church, because someone comes as a first-time guest at our church, boom, they're going to hear 7, 8, 9 times that they should come to the welcome class. Then they come to the welcome class, and when we're in the welcome class, we're going to tell them our theology and all that stuff, but then we're going to get to the ending, and we're like, and here's what a growth group is, and here's why it's so good, and Pastor Dave in there always says, has anyone in here ever been in a growth group? Usually there's like one, because I said we're a little flexible, and so there's always one person, and the person's always like, oh man, it's so good, I'm so glad it, and the other people are like, wow. And so they've all got sheets in front of them, they have their name on it, and it says, what growth group do you want to be in? Put the number here. And then we've got sheets in the little packet that's got a picture of every growth group leader, a description of the growth group. It's got a list. It tells them if they have a pet or not for allergies. It shows them kind of in the city where the person lives. Like, we've done all the hard work. All they got to do is go, number 5. Then I'll pick that sheet up for you. And then we pick it up for them. All they got to do is write a number down. And that's the welcome class. And then guess what happens? We started the growth group process. They get a letter, thanks, or an email. Thanks for joining growth group number 5. The growth group leader sends them the email. Then the growth group leader follows up with a phone call. Hey, I'm so glad you joined my growth group. We're going to meet this day and this time. Just a reminder. Then they get a text message the day before, all along telling them, here's what you're going to bring. Here's what to expect. Then they come to the growth group, and we've already decided for them if there's babysitters or not, all that stuff. They come to the growth group, and at the growth group, week number 1, they see another picture of the roadmap, right? They'd already saw it at welcome class. Now they're seeing it at growth group because the growth group leader is going to tell everybody about the roadmap again. Yeah, you repeat it a million times. Like just boom. And then 3rd week of growth group, they're telling them, look, man, if you are not serving yet, and you've been in growth group for 2 or 3 rounds, you should start serving. And they get a list of places they can serve in the church. And then they get to take a survey on their phone. Everybody gets their phone out and takes a survey. And that survey says, are you interested in this or that? Or what are you interested in? And then it goes to the ministry leader. And then the ministry leader contacts the person. Hey, I heard you were interested in playing guitar on the worship team. And so we just keep moving them down that roadmap. So let's get real practical. How are you going to do this? Number 1, you have to decide where people should end up. You know, for us, we know that we wanted people, to end up in leadership, right? That was our goal. We want people to end up in a leadership position. And so everything pushes people there. But how are we going to do it? With healthy Christian community. And so we want people not just to end up leading, we want people to end up leading communities. That's where we want people to end up in our church when they first walk in. The first time someone walks in, they're not even a Christian yet, we all know we want that person to be a leader in our community. And our roadmap helps them get there. You have to decide where you want people to end up, otherwise your roadmap won't work. Second thing you have to do, this is the practical stuff. You might want to jot down notes here. Second thing, you have to decide where the beginning point is. For us, it's being a first-time guest. That's where they start. Is that a good starting point for your church? Every church is different. Third, you have to figure out the normal path of maturity. We discovered at our church, because we're so community oriented, that the normal path of maturity was, we want them to learn about the church, but then we want them to start digging in with a small group. That was just the most normal thing. You don't want to make your steps so abnormal that it feels awkward. Right? First, you're a first-time guest of the church. Second step is preach a sermon. Right? Like, God, what just happened? Right? You gotta make it feel normal. Okay. And then after you do that, after you make it feel normal for levels of maturity, fourth thing you do is then you have to make the processes that push people from one to another. So it's nice that you got a roadmap, but how do you get people to go from here to here, right? What happens right there? That's a huge question. So you're going to write your roadmap out. You're going to decide your goal. You're going to decide the starting point. And you can figure out what's the normal path to get there. But then you're going to ask the question, what happens in between? What's the hard work that we can do to make this transition? Transitions are difficult for everybody, so you do the difficult part so that your guests don't have to. Number 5, then you have to repeat this over and over and over and over to everyone all the time. People in my church are sick of the roadmap. We just recently had a membership class, and you remember membership is towards the end of our roadmap. So most of the people who came to our membership class, they're not even members yet. You know what? They already basically had the roadmap memorized. Why? Because they heard it at the welcome class. They hear it every time they go to a growth group. If they go to a leadership class here, they hear the roadmap. It's all over the place. Teach it again and again and again. Why? Because everybody in your church needs to know it. Because that way everybody in your church is pushing in the same direction. I tell you, it's so beautiful when I'm walking around on Sunday morning and I see a new guest sitting in a chair and I hear someone else say to them, "Oh, you've never been here before? You should totally go to the walking class." And they're like, "Yeah, someone else told me about that." I'm like, yes! It's so beautiful because now everyone in our church knows what's expected. And we all push people in the right direction together. So you have to repeat it over and over and over. You over-communicate until the point people are sick of hearing it, and then they'll start doing it. Over and over and over and over. Okay, just one more time. Just repeat it over and over and over. Number 6, refuse to do it any other way. Refuse to do it any other way. You're going to have people coming in all the time, like the guy who wanted to preach a sermon. You're going to have people coming in going, "Oh man, I want to become a member. I love this church so much." And it's going to be their 3rd month there. And they're not going to have completed a whole round of growth groups. They're not going to be serving anywhere yet. And they're going to be, "I just love it. I want to be a member." And you're going to say, "It's not really time to be a member yet." And they're going to say, "But I love this church." And you're going to feel like, "Man, maybe we should let them become a member." Trust me, don't do it. Don't do it. You got to be rigid in some areas. We put our membership here for a reason. There's a reason it's here and not here. You got to stick to it. Because if you make exceptions, then this may be your plan. This may be your mission statement hanging on the wall. But what you do, your processes, are happening down the hall. So you got to stick to it. You got to be rigid in the areas that you know are important to stick to. So don't do it any other way. Hope you see how this roadmap can take your church from where it is now and just expand it, help you reach many, many more people. Does it take a lot of work? Yes. The Great Commission is worth it. Define your steps, create processes to get to the next step, and you're going to see people coming to faith in Jesus Christ.